president of American Baptist College. Now, Dr. Lafayette, you know, before we had our second break, we were talking about the civil rights movement. But now, we all know that this morning we will celebrate the anniversary of the Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday. And the most important thing about it is to remember that Dr. King was assassinated in the state of Tennessee, in Memphis. And I think that it is almost incumbent upon us living in the state of Tennessee to reflect upon that. And that's what we'd like for you to do over the last 5.5 minutes that we have here, to recall the instance that you heard of Dr. King's assassination and some of the things that went through your mind and how people that you know and who were close to you and et cetera, how you felt at that particular time. This might recall memories that you've not had for the last 30 years, but sort of reflect with us as a community now dealing with that part in April of 1968, that assassination.
During this period of the movement, I was traveling with Martin Luther King because I was national coordinator for the Poor People's Campaign. And we were laying the groundwork for that, and we were going around from one city to another getting support because we wanted people to organize locally so they could bring people to Washington, D.C. for the grand march that we were going to have in D.C. It was scheduled for actually the first time in February, but we didn't succeed in getting the numbers. And Martin Luther King wanted to make sure we had strong numbers and people committed. So he was traveling with us, and we were traveling with him, going to different cities. We were having a meeting, actually a staff meeting in Atlanta, which was a strategy meeting, and Martin Luther King was asked to come, go over to Memphis. Jim Lawson, who's one who was actually involved in the movement many years with us, was having to work with the sanitation workers, and the support was waning. He said, so, if Martin Luther King could just come to Memphis, have a speech, and have a little rally, a march, and that would bring the kind of focus on this and perhaps the pressure to get them to negotiate. So Martin Luther King was reluctant. He said, well, this is not on our schedule, and he said, okay, why don't you all just continue to meet. I'll take Bernard Lee with me, and we'll just fly over to Memphis, have this, and then we'll come back and continue our meeting. Well, as you know in history, that the march broke out in violence, and Martin Luther King only had one of his own staff people there. So the decision was made that the march had to be, organized over again. And so therefore he brought the staff people from Atlanta all to Memphis to reorganize this march. Well, we were meeting there, and I was with Martin Luther King the night before, and it was interesting, this great speech that was made about the mountaintop. Martin Luther King didn't want to make the speech. It was raining cats and dogs. I mean, it was pouring down. Martin Luther King was in his pajamas. He had sent Ralph Abernathy to make the speech. He said, Ralph, you go. I'm just tired and worn out. And another little thing happened. The publicity was very negative about that march being, and Martin Luther King was concerned that the media was going to say that the movement was waning, and so therefore when he would go out there and it's raining cats and dogs, only a few people would come. That had some impact over whether or not the support was there. Well, that was the other reason he didn't want to go. He sent Ralph, he's a good friend. Great to have a friend like Ralph. Ralph got there and said, no, Martin Luther King, he called back. He said, you got to come. This is your crowd. He said, when I walked through the door, the people just went up. And when they found out I was by myself, he said, the fellas dropped. He said, this is your crowd. And they were standing outside in the rain at Mason Temple there in Memphis. Well, I was with him in his room, so he got up and he put on his clothes and we went over to the temple. That was one of the greatest speeches he ever made. Well, the next day, to make a long story short, he said that I should continue and go on to Washington, D.C., so we could stay on schedule and open up the campaign office, which was on U Street. I think it's 14th and U in Washington, D.C. Well, actually, I was in flight when Martin Luther King was shot. And I didn't know until I arrived at the airport, National Airport, what had happened, because no one there to pick me up, and I called, the place was rioting. I mean, all over. So at that point, he'd just been shot. So we got AP and UPI on the phone. I had one on one phone and one on the other. and they were reading the ticker tapes. You know, in those days they had ticker tapes that would come out out of the you know, news media. So I was hoping it was just shot, but then as I stayed on the tape, and I could hear the guy break down because he was reading it to me. He was gracious enough to read it to me, and he broke down and said, "Announcement has come from Memphis that Martin Luther King is dead." So I called back to Memphis, and they told me not to come back to Memphis, but to meet them in Atlanta. Well, I felt a certain part of my world had come to an end. And, but then, as I got some distance on that experience, I began to see how we could utilize Martin Luther King's teachings and his work even today in helping to solve problems.
And of course, I think Dr. Lafayette, let us say over the last 30 seconds that we have here, that you have indeed played a very, very significant role in helping to utilize Martin's ideas and Martin's thoughts in terms of the civil rights movement and to help broaden civil rights and diversity and whatnot, and you've played a very, very significant role in doing that. And I'm sure that Dr. Martin Luther King would be very, very proud of some of the things that you've been involved with. And let me thank you for coming by and being with us. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.